Ever since I built a crokinole board a few years ago, I've been trying to refine this technique of segments that meet in a perfect center. It's really, really hard. And I think I got the technique down well enough now that I can actually make some things pretty easily. What I'm going to do here is a bunch of testing with some Western red cedar to create these shapes, glue them together, check glue joints, put everything together to make an octagon, 16 segments, and hopefully they meet in the center. It got pretty close. You see, the key to the whole thing here is, of course, using the sliding table saw. I have these hold down clamps from Rockler using mag switches, and this lets me get a very precise cut on this board. The perfection that you need in order to not have a gap when you put 16 segments together is pretty ridiculous. So this is how they're cut. I use a caul on top to help the clamping pressure to hold everything. Any slippage in the mag switches or the piece, it can knock it out, and you have to start all over again in trying to set everything up. You can see the precision of the table saw looking at the tips of these. Getting a perfect point is really, really hard, and you can see that it's actually a 90-degree end to these. I recently overhauled the entire table saw, new bearings, new slide bearings, everything, and spent a lot of time tuning it, and I think it's paying off. So here you see I'm cutting out the 16 segments. If everything's perfect when I assemble them, creating the stop sign here, everything should come out perfectly in the end. And what you'll see is there's a 1/4 inch gap on the outside. So the gap is on the outside of the circle, which means I need to narrow the tip this way. Yes, narrow the tip. And the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to put this one next to it to get a perfect match. I'm going to take my feeler gauge, and I have it 10 thousandths is all I'm going to do. I don't know if I like this feeler gauge. Let's try this again a little bit here. There we go, that's the one I want, instead of putting it in a gap. So that's 10 thousandths added over 16 segments. You do the math and it ends up being, what, 3/8 of an inch? And I'll bring this back. And these are the pieces I have to recut. And the amount I'm going to cut off is determined by the length here. Yeah, I messed it up. There we go. I've got my set, and that's what I'll cut. It should cut off a 1/2 a saw width at this end, maybe a little less, and maybe just touch on this end. After adjusting everything, I recut all 16 pieces here, being extremely careful with the clamps and making sure that I could be as precise as possible. It's amazing how easy it is to screw up just one of these and have the whole thing just get to be out of control. Put it back together and everything came out very well this time. There's a little bit of a gap in the middle, which is actually easier to deal with because you can plane down or sand down the outside edges much more easily than the center point. So then it came time to glue up, and I'm using the tape method here, gluing 8 of these joints first and then putting the whole thing together, trying to be as precise as I can. Strap clamp around the outside and then a weight on the middle. Let the thing sit overnight, came back, taped up the other joints, the other 4 joints, well, 4 of the other 8 joints, so that I could do the next piece. Just doing these, one section at a time, strap it up again, put a weight on it, make sure that everything stays nice and flat. The face of this is on the underside. The top side here is the back of the board. What I found was actually the precision of the joints changes with the absorption of the glue, and the humidity changes from day to day, and it was really hard to get this to stay precise. Once everything was all glued up and set, I did a whole bunch of sanding. Sanded the front and the back, and started with 120, went to 240, went to 320. Tried to get it as much of a sheen as possible that was remotely finish related. Here I am cutting the octagon into a circle using my circle cutting jig. In the right side of the screen you'll see a small piece of tape. That's a stop block, or a pin that goes through the rail there to stop it from going forward. That makes a huge difference in keeping the blade aligned with the pin. So I can slide this thing in, start the rotation, and then slide it back to me when I'm done. Cutting a perfect circle is actually really easy. The underside of the board is going to have a hole in it, but nobody's going to care. The top side is nice and clean. Once the circle was cut, I actually spent a lot of time sanding the edges, did a round over on the edges, did a whole bunch more sanding up to 320, and then started the finish process. Here, it's always so satisfying to put the first coat of finish on. And this is just the first coat of polyurethane, and let this soak in, and then I go through another whole sanding process. This is just to raise the grain, but it does look good. Once the finish is on, the next day I'll come back to the sanding. Then every finish coat after this is going to be a spray polyurethane. This one has 4 or 5 coats of the spray on it. It's starting to look pretty good. You can see the color change as it rotates. That's the vertical grain in the wood. Spray polyurethane. On the underside, I added a piece of plywood to help strengthen the entire thing. Added the Lazy Susan ring, and then this is what you get. It's not bad. I'm quite happy with it. Look at the colors change as you rotate this. And of course, me being me, I don't just make one. I made 5. Stop signs in process. I also looked at the different finishes. The one on the right is actually polyacrylic. I don't like it, so I'm going to stay with polyurethane. And that's what I did. It's a Lazy Susan.